What's up, fellas? My name is Tucker. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how NBA free agency has completely changed as a result of this offseason. If you enjoy this type of content, leave a like rating on it. Consider subscribing for more just like it. Check out my socials right there as well. And let's go ahead and get started. So we all know that NBA free agency is completely different to how it used to be. There are bigger contracts, more player movement. The length of the contracts is different, where it allows for more player flexibility. The players have more say now than ever. But this offseason specifically has introduced a new thing, or built upon something that was put into place a couple of off seasons ago, that has really changed how free agency works in the league. Which is interesting because free agency is arguably the most powerful, the most integral tool to modern NBA team building. Just think about the last couple of championship teams that we've had, and think about how free agency has come into play with each of them, whether it's been LeBron jumping to different teams, whether it has been Kevin Durant going to Golden State, whether it was Kawhi Leonard being traded to Toronto as a result of threatening to leave San Antonio in, you guessed it, free agency. Now, the only counter to that argument would be that the draft is still the most important part of modern team building across the board, but especially for the biggest market teams in the league, mastering free agency and using it properly is probably the best and the easiest way to build a championship level team. But as I said, things are kind of different now. And what's different is something that was introduced a couple of years ago and has become more and more common over the years, and that is the sign and trade mechanic. And we already saw it used multiple times in this offseason. The Chicago Bulls by themselves went through with two different sign and trades. The Miami Heat brought in Kyle Lowry via sign and trade as well. And I think this is a really, really interesting glimpse into how this could potentially alter the way we look at free agency. Now, up until the last few years, sign and trades existed, but they weren't really nearly as common, and it kind of makes sense exactly why. Why would teams go out of their way to give up assets in a sign and trade, draft picks, young players, when they could just sign free agents outright? Trades are meant for players that are under contract that you're trading back and forth. Why would you need to sign a player and then trade them away, or trade for them, I should say, and give up assets? And players didn't want to do it either, because you're weakening the team that you're going to. Some of the things that you like about the team that you're going to in free agency, you're taking away some of those things, whether it be draft capital or young players, by being involved in a sign and trade. There's also salary cap mechanics that made it way more difficult, and it just didn't make nearly as much sense to follow through on sign and trades, and it really just wasn't that big of a part of the offseason, except for the last couple of years. But now I think it's arguably one of the biggest and most important mechanics within free agency. So why exactly did that change? Well, we got to go back to the 2019 offseason. This is a really critical turning point in how we now view free agency as it relates to sign and trades. There's two big moves here. The first of which is Kevin Durant going to Brooklyn, which we all kind of knew was going to happen in the days leading up to it. It became pretty clear that it was going to be Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving going to Brooklyn, and the Nets had the cap space to sign both those guys outright. They moved some money around. They also were able to sign DeAndre Jordan, and it was kind of known that that was just going to be it. But something developed over the following few days where it made a little bit more sense for Brooklyn to actually initiate this as a sign and trade, and getting Kevin Durant in a sign and trade to Golden State, and then ended up wrapping in D'Angelo Russell. I can remember going to sleep the night before D'Angelo Russell went to Golden State. There was a lot of buzz about him going to Minnesota, and Minnesota was trying to move different pieces. They were trying to create the money to sign D'Angelo Russell to a big contract in free agency, and I went to sleep thinking that D'Angelo Russell was going to be a Minnesota Timberwolf. Then I wake up the next day, and he's traded to Golden State in a sign and trade in exchange for Kevin Durant. There were salary cap benefits to Brooklyn for making it a sign and trade, while obviously Golden State ended up getting D'Angelo Russell rather than just losing Kevin Durant for nothing. And that was a Golden State team that, even with KD leaving and his salary coming off the books, did not have the cap space to sign someone to a max level contract the way that D'Angelo Russell was signed to. And then the other one in the exact same offseason was Jimmy Butler going to the Miami Heat in exchange for Josh Richardson. The Butler thing didn't work out in Philly. It worked out in Minnesota for the team, but not for Jimmy Butler. He wanted to leave. It was a little weird in Philly. He ends up in Miami in exchange for Josh Richardson, but Miami did not have the salary cap space to outright sign Jimmy Butler to the contract that he signed with them. And again, it was another max contract level player. Regardless what you think about Jimmy Butler or D'Angelo Russell, these are still max contract players signing to teams and ending up in teams in free agency that did not have the ability to sign them as max contract free agents in the first place. And the only reason that they were able to make these things happen were because of a sign and trade. Now, I didn't quite know exactly what that meant in the moment, but I knew it meant something, that teams that didn't have salary cap space to a max level were able to bring in max level players. That the whole max contract thing is a foundational part of modern NBA free agency. The Knicks, the Nets, the Heat, all these teams over the years that are big free agency players, I say over the years, the Nets obviously more recently, have always prioritized we need to have one, maybe even two max contract spaces within a particular offseason. That was the way to build a super team. That was the way that you were going to be able to, as a bigger market team, go from a middling team to a great team, was through max contract space. How many times have you been, watching a video of mine or watching someone else's videos, watching ESPN, and they're talking about, oh, they can create a max slot or two max slots. But here are two teams that didn't have max contract space and they got max guys anyway, again, via a sign and trade. So I was thinking, do teams not have to plan to sign max contract players anymore? Is the only thing that matters the interest of the player going to a particular team, and then as soon as they say this is where I want to go, they end up making it work salary-wise in some kind of way? Does max contract space not really matter anymore? Or were these just special circumstances? The Nets weren't going to bring back D'Angelo Russell in any scenario that offseason that involved them bringing in Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, despite the fact that he did make an all-star team the previous year. And so he was never going to return anyway, and it didn't seem like Jimmy Butler was going to return to Philly either. So it was possible that these were just very special circumstances. But this offseason has provided much more clarity on that, and it's clear that those weren't just special circumstances, because in this offseason alone, we have two sign and trades with Chicago where they get Lonzo Ball, they get DeMar DeRozan. They also signed Alex Caruso. The combination of those three players' first-year salaries next year for Chicago is pretty close to $60 million, and they had like $20 million in salary cap space coming in the offseason. The only way they were able to bring in as much talent as they were via sign and trades. There were other ones as well. Of course, the big one is Kyle Lowry going to Miami, a team that could have created some salary cap space to bring in Kyle Lowry, but they were able to make a pretty big deal work while also retaining Duncan Robinson, while also retaining Bam Adebayo on an extension previously, while also retaining Jimmy Butler on an extension, and bring in Kyle Lowry, again, because of sign and trades. And then probably the biggest one here as it relates to this argument of how it changes things and how player choice matters now more than ever was Spencer Dinwiddie. We found out a couple hours into free agency that Spencer Dinwiddie was going to go to Washington. We didn't know what the numbers were on the deal. We didn't know how that was going to happen because it didn't seem like Washington had the salary cap space even after trading away Russell Westbrook. It didn't make any sense. But you know what it did make sense for afterwards? A sign and trade. There was like 5 or 6 different teams. It was folded into the Westbrook trade, and suddenly Spencer Dinwiddie was a Washington Wizard. And the reason that worked was because Dinwiddie said, this is where I want to go. Washington was negotiating with a free agent that they didn't have the money to sign in the first place, but they figured out a way to make it work. They got a sign and trade together, and ultimately Spencer Dinwiddie became a member of the Washington Wizards. And I think that is really what it comes down to, is teams that are not really in position to sign particular players in free agency are still going to be a part of the conversation leading up to that offseason anyway. The idea that Chicago could get both Lonzo Ball and DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso in this offseason would not have made sense a month ago. And if I had seen rumors about the fact that they were going to bring those three guys together, or just DeMar and Lonzo, I would have been questioning how exactly they would have made that work. But teams can be more involved now in free agency than ever before, and it just speaks so much more to the flexibility that NBA front offices not only value, but are fantastic at creating now. They can dump salaries on other teams to create max contract space quickly. You can trade away a guy into a traded player exception that's also becoming more and more common. We saw the Mavs dump Josh Richardson on the Celtics. Boom, $11 million in salary cap space created out of nowhere. And then this sign and trade mechanic as well. All these things together prioritize a couple of things. 1, roster flexibility. 2, a very competent front office. It puts you miles ahead of everyone else if your front office really knows what they're doing. And 3, player choice. Over and over again, through free agency as a whole, we have seen players go where they want to go no matter what. It doesn't matter the salary cap situation. It doesn't matter how expensive their contract is. It doesn't matter if the team has space to sign them in the first place. If Spencer Dinwiddie says, I want to go to Washington. If DeMar DeRozan says, I want to go to Chicago. If Jimmy Butler says, I want to go to Miami. If Kyle Lowry says, I want to go to Miami. If James Harden says he wants to go to Brooklyn or Philadelphia. Those guys end up there, and the sign and trade mechanic makes that even more of a possibility in situations where it shouldn't be one in the first place. Now, it doesn't work for every situation, and there will be times like in the 2020 offseason where there really aren't any big name sign and trades in a technicality afterwards, for example, the Gordon Hayward signing in Charlotte was technically a sign and trade. It created this huge trade of player exception for Boston where they get Evan Fournier during the year and then they get Josh Richardson now. Those kinds of sign and trades are not really what I'm speaking to here because Charlotte was able to create that cap space with or without the sign and trade. That wasn't really the point. But even outside of special circumstances like that, I think moving forward, we're going to see at least 1 to 2 significant sign and trades every single offseason because it's becoming a more viable option. I think teams are understanding a little bit better how exactly to use it. And 2, it's going to be much more of a conversation. Free agents that wouldn't even have considered Chicago or Washington in these examples as possibilities for them to go to in free agency because they don't have the space will now consider those to be an option. So if you're a free agent coming up, you're going to make $20 million a year and the only teams in the league that have cap space are Orlando and Oklahoma City, you can still talk to Chicago, Boston, New York, whoever it may be, because you can always make it work. Everybody in the league has 1 or 2 random young guys on their roster that they could throw into a sign and trade and it could look relatively promising and you're getting value. And I think that is the other critical part of this is we're looking at guys like DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry that were shopped at the deadline as expiring free agents. Those guys always get moved, always. If you're a team that's going nowhere in that particular season, Toronto, San Antonio, and you know that those guys are unlikely to return, Lowry, DeRozan, those guys always get moved at the deadline, and we scream and yell when they don't get value out of them at the deadline, just like I kind of was when they didn't get value out of Lowry or DeRozan, because I was thinking they're going to walk for nothing. It's what we've been told forever. It's the biggest downfall of free agency and impending free agents is having your guy leave for nothing and not getting value. But we've seen time and time again, the Nets get Kevin Durant. You think Golden State gets no value out of it? Nope, they get D'Angelo Russell, who turns into other things down the road for Golden State. Philly didn't get great value for Jimmy Butler. It was just Josh Richardson, who didn't have a great season for him, but then he turns into Seth Curry, who's a critical part of their team now. The Spurs are getting a future first for DeMar DeRozan. The Raptors are getting Precious Achiuwa and Goran Dragic, who they can move for other value, and I think Achiuwa is going to be a nice player for them. There's value to be had here on either side in free agency with these sign and trades, and so I think they're going to continue to be a thing, and it changes how we look at free agency. It opens up more options. It continues to prioritize player choice, and it allows teams to be a little bit more patient with potentially trading guys on expiring contracts. And what does that lead to? The possibility of players like the biggest name at the moment, Bradley Beal. Let's say that Bradley Beal does not make a commitment to Washington. It gets to the trade deadline and they decide to keep him. Well, let's say in the 2021 or 2022 offseason, he's like, you know what? I'm going to leave. I don't want to be in Washington anymore. I want to go to Golden State. That's the team I want to go to. They don't have salary cap space. They can't sign him. All of a sudden, Washington is getting a nice trade package and a sign and trade for Bradley Beal when he never could have gone there before as a free agent. It changes everything. It is such an interesting wrinkle to add in to modern NBA free agency, and I cannot wait to see how these front offices continue to utilize it over the next couple of years. And I think it all goes back to specifically that 2019 offseason with the Jimmy Butler and the Kevin Durant transactions. And yeah, that's going to be the end of today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like rating on it. Check out more videos from me. The box is on screen. Check out my socials up top as well. Once again, my name is Tucker. Hope you guys have an awesome rest of your Monday, and I will see y'all next time.